The slow-motion nuclear crisis in Japan has brought new scrutiny for nuclear power here in New England. Today at the State House, legislators grilled representatives of the nuclear plants in Plymouth, Massachusetts and Seabrook, New Hampshire. Both sit within 50 miles of Boston. Adam Riley has more.
Today at the State House, the message from New England's nuclear power plants was simple. Our reactors are safe.
We also live and work in the community. We pride ourselves on running a good station, and safety is our #1 priority.
When the Nuclear Regulatory Commission briefed Governor Patrick on the issue last week, the tidings were similarly soothing.
The plants here in the United States are safe. We have robust designs, robust operating procedures.
But Attorney General Martha Coakley notes that, like Japan's troubled Fukushima plant, Plymouth's Pilgrim facility and Vermont Yankee store their spent nuclear fuel in pools of water that are constantly refilled. When the system fails, that fuel can overheat and ignite, sending dangerous radiation into the environment.
I'm here to talk about the need for these nuclear plants to consider using safer forms of storage for spent nuclear fuel.
Mary Lampert of the group Pilgrim Watch agrees that wet storage is dangerous. And she says so are the electric cables that provide Pilgrim's power.
These cables are buried underground, but they're not qualified to be in moist conditions. And we know that Pilgrim, Seabrook, they're adjacent to the water. They're at tides twice a day. They have been sitting in a wet environment for about 40 years.
Lampert adds that federal evacuation plans for an incident at Pilgrim are too lax and that the state needs to step in.
The state has the authority to put into place emergency plans that are more conservative. There are no plans to notify citizens at 11 miles. There are no plans for evacuation. And so what's going to happen? Total chaos.
And Lampert has a rebuttal for anyone who thinks she's just being an alarmist.
Fukushima, the cause was loss of off-site power. You don't need an earthquake or a tsunami for this to happen.
In the coming weeks, New England's nuclear plants will conduct their own safety reviews, followed by visits from NRC representatives. But for critics who don't trust the industry or federal regulators, that may not be enough.
All right, and joining me now are Gilbert Brown, coordinator of the Nuclear Engineering Program at UMass Lowell, and Gordon Thompson from the Institute for Resource and Security Studies. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Well, these two issues that have been raised, I mean, the issues surrounding Vermont Yankee and Plymouth have come around and around for years, I mean, years and years and years. But this is actually very specific now. There's the storage of these spent fuel rods, and apparently there's more of them there than they ever intended them to be. And the issue that Mary Lampert brings up about the power being the real issue in Fukushima. I mean, are those legitimate issues?
For sure, the handling of the fuel after it's been used in the reactor has to be taken care of. And this is a federal issue. We've had plans, federal law, to take ownership of this fuel. And instead, the plants have kept them safely in their spent fuel pools, we call them. And as the pools get full, they've been put into dry cask storage. Apparently, and I think it's a good idea, frankly, is we should be moving more of the fuel out into dry cask storage.
What happened to that? That whole thing that was supposed to happen out in Nevada?
Whatever happened to it?
That's what I'm asking you.
Ask Mr. Reed, because this was federal policy. In fact, it's a bit of a mess right now federally. So how we're handling the Waste Policy Act, frankly, it got put on hold. And in this time out of federal movement towards licensure of the Yucca Mountain site, we have a new national commission to revisit the whole, what we call, back end of the fuel cycle, what happens after the fuel gets into the reactor, when it comes out. And actually, it's a good opportunity to maybe do something more holistic with the fuel and not just take the fuel as it is and put it into a repository and forget about it, because there's more we could do better if we viewed the whole process of waste management.
Well, that's one of the issues. It's plant to plant, and one may have dry storage, another has the wet storage. I mean, why isn't there some just sort of universal way we're dealing with this?
Well,
let me give a little background on this spent fuel storage issue. When plants like Pilgrim and Vermont Yankee were first designed and built, the assumption was that only a small amount of spent fuel would be stored in these pools. As it turned out, the fuel had to remain on the reactor site because the reprocessing option that was envisioned didn't occur. The industry took the cheapest option, which was to pack those spent fuel pools at very high density. There was a more expensive option that was always available to them, has been available for 30 years now, of keeping the fuel stored at low density in those pools and putting the remainder of the fuel in dry casks on the reactor site. Contrary to the assertions that U.S. plants are safer than the Fukushima plants, in fact, plants like Pilgrim have substantially more spent fuel packed at high density in the pools than Fukushima. And this is simply a product of cost minimization by the industry.
That's what people like Mary Lampert are saying. What about the issue that she raised with the power cords? I think it's fascinating.
Well, I'm not a power engineer, so I can't talk specifically to those issues.
But she makes the issue, forget about the buried wires, the fact that it was really the loss of power that caused the damage.
So we call that station blackout, loss of power. This is not analyzed in our industry. And in fact, we constantly are learning and improving and drawing lessons learned to improve the design basis of the plants. And clearly, station blackout is one of those areas that we have addressed, frankly, since 9/11, brought new attention. After 3 Mile Island, we had a lot of lessons learned too, but after 9/11, we also addressed specifically station blackout, hydrogen mitigation, a whole bunch of issues that we're dealing with in Fukushima. It's not clear how many of the lessons that we learned and implemented in our plants, plant by plant. I was listening to the NRC in a federal hearing just this morning talk about all the things that were done that address issues like how much time you need battery backup, plant by plant, based on the site-specific availability of other off-site power. So whether it's 4 hours, 8 hours, whether we need to go to 6 hours and 10 hours, there's a realistic number that will envelope the scenarios that we can imagine.
Right. You know, just down to earth here for a minute. The NRC, as we've heard, they believe there's no problem, nothing, despite what you said. They have complete control over whether Pilgrim, for instance, is relicensed. We abdicated that back with the retooling of the electricity stuff back in the 90s. So it's a moot point. It's going to be relicensed here, correct?
Well, the NRC is a politically influenced organization, and there are documented instances where influential members of Congress have brought the NRC to heel by threatening to reduce its budget. So when we look at the decisions NRC makes, we should not forget that ultimately they're influenced by politics.
Absolutely. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here today. This has not been resolved, but
no, not by a long shot.
Not at all.